This is the 5th episode in our mini-series Entering the China Tech Dragon, all about data and cybersecurity. Mark, please take it away.
Okay, thanks, Jerome. So look, I think, basically there is a bit of a tech war between China and the West, or particularly with the US. And so, we do see tech as being very sensitive. And I think a lot of the sensitivity is about data. It's also about cybersecurity. A lot of the views that you read about really seem to say that cybersecurity law was going to be a massive concern, that foreign companies would have to leave. But actually, we haven't seen that. The cybersecurity law and the data laws have been changing the way that clients are doing their business in China. But the laws, really, for the main part, have been reasonable, and they haven't seemingly been used against any specific tech companies. So I think cybersecurity is an issue. It's not really surprising that China has a cybersecurity law. It's probably more of a surprise that it only has come out recently in the recent years. So information and communications technology is critical for global security. And I think China's obviously worried about their critical infrastructure, or the data of Chinese businesses, citizens, or government will be compromised. And I think this has been something that, especially for citizens, 10, 20 years ago, there was really no concept of having privacy, but now citizens care about it. I think people overblow it a bit. I think perhaps Chinese consumers are not as concerned as Europeans, but they are increasingly concerned. And Western companies who used to ignore these kind of concerns are now required to follow the law in this regard. So I think the other issue is China is also loosening restrictions, in some cases eliminating restrictions in foreign investment in a number of different sectors. But I think cybersecurity and these related areas, like the Internet of Things, AI, autonomous vehicles, parts of that will still remain quite sensitive because they are connected to critical infrastructure, and it has a security issue. So I think the trend will continue, but for some of these sectors, it will open up more slowly than more traditional sectors, like perhaps the automotive sector or the banking and financial sector. So I think for tech companies, they have to realize they will be perhaps more impacted by cybersecurity or data requirements than traditional companies. So I think the most important thing for both of these is the situation is perhaps not as bleak as people say. Just know the laws, know what the real issues are, and don't be overly concerned about theoretical risks. Okay, so the main concerns that people have are about security assessments, source code disclosure, PRC government access to data, cross-border data transfer. And I think all of these concerns, are legitimate to an extent, but they have been perhaps overplayed to a large degree. So the key data issues that I see in China is there's still no comprehensive law in place. A lot of the regulations are still in draft form. And yet it's often the case that in China, you can't really wait for the law to be passed. And so draft regulations are really a good indication of where the government is moving. So we would still tell clients, even if the regulations are not yet effective, consider them and work out how you could comply with them, because it at least shows the current stage of thinking in China, and that's important. So I think one thing which we have seen is, like I mentioned, consumers care more about privacy and data protection than they did 10 years ago. And so personal information should normally be anonymized. Sometimes it's pseudonymized. And so when you're collecting information, it's best to have an opt-in practice where you obtain consent and you advise about how it's going to be dealt with. And then I think personal information collected within China should remain within China. So there is some of our clients will actually collect the information offshore and have the Chinese consumer volunteer such information. It's a little bit of a gray area, but I think it's unlikely to be a major issue as long as it's not like a mass a collection of information and it's legitimate. And again, it will always depend on how the information is being used, what safeguards are in place, and the scale of the collection. so again, I think none of this will be very surprising for anybody with a European background. So, explicit consent is required. There's non-disclosure obligations. There is a limited scope. You shouldn't collect more information than you need for the reasons that you say that you're using it for. And you should have a complaint system in place. So I think, again, people, when they look at, well, 10 years ago, we didn't have to do any of this, they get upset. But then when they look at their own country, they realize that these kind of requirements are very legitimate and, not a bit of a light touch, if anything, not overly oppressive. So what are the real concerns? I think really if we're looking at cybersecurity and data, but especially for cybersecurity, I think for most companies, you may not be able, if you're like a financial software system or you're some kind of Internet of Things for a big SOE, and that obviously it'd be a financial institute, but it could be like a power supply company. It could even be one of the big oil companies or something like that. If you are in that kind of financial sector, crucial infrastructure, large SOE, you may not be able to sell your product directly to them unless you've undergone a security assessment. So I think the rest of the market, in most cases, will not be an issue, but that part of the market may be at risk if you're not willing to undergo the security assessment, because it's legitimate. These things could really affect national security, so somebody has to make sure that it is stable, safe, and secure technology. So on data compliance, I mean, this is a bit of a checklist. I won't go through all of it, but most of it's common sense. And the issue, I think, which is perhaps most complicated, is the offshore transfer of data. And then, an example could be HR data. Can you send it to your offshore company? Can the offshore company send that data to somebody else to do the processing? So I think anywhere where you see the data's going overseas, it's an issue, and work out what data it is, something which we haven't covered in here because it's complex. But state secrets, state secrets is a very sensitive topic. So, see what data you're collecting, and state secrets could be even like geo-positioning. It could be like electronic mapping. It can be, the amount of pork being consumed or things like that. So be careful when you're collecting the data, and when you're moving it overseas, be careful that it doesn't stray into something that may be considered a state secret.
Thank you for watching the 5th episode of our mini-series, Entering the Tech Dragon. If you have any questions about this episode or previous episodes, or you're a tech company looking to enter the Chinese market yourself, please reach out, as we're offering a free check of trademarks in China. We could do an initial review of your business scope, and we would offer you a free consultation through Zoom. You can find Mark's contact information on the screen, or you could send an email or message through YouTube. Thank you for watching.